She fined me $5,000 and called Marines careless. I exposed a $150,000 fraud, and she lost everything. My name is Paul. I'm 62, and I'm professionally boring. After 25 years in the Marine Corps, my biggest battles these days are with my sprinkler system and the squirrels that steal from my bird feeder. I bought my place in Palm Creek Estates 8 years ago because it was quiet. Our HOA was a formality. We paid dues, the grass got mowed, and everyone minded their own business. It was perfect. Then, 6 months ago, at a meeting only 5 people attended. They elected her. Let's call her Karen. I know it's a cliche, but I swear I'm not making this up. Her actual name is Karen. Karen Westbrook. She's maybe mid-40s, has that haircut, always in white tennis outfits, and carries an iPad everywhere like it's the nuclear launch codes. Her husband, Rick, is a local developer, one of those guys who's always almost successful. He builds McMansion subdivisions with names like Whisper Valley Preserve, where there's never been a whisper of a valley within 10 miles. Word is his last project went sideways, and they had to downsize to our neighborhood. When you're used to being a big fish, ending up in a small pond makes you want to prove something. Karen proved something all right. Within 2 weeks of taking over as HOA president, the email started. Long, detailed messages about community standards and property values and maintaining the aesthetic integrity of Palm Creek Estates. She created committees. She made a Facebook group. The rules came fast. Your Christmas lights had to be warm white, color code 304C, not bright white, code 305B. She included the actual color codes. Your garbage cans couldn't be visible from the street after 7 a.m. on non-collection days. Your car couldn't be parked in your driveway for more than 48 consecutive hours without moving it at least one full car length. My neighbor Jerry Thompson, 79 years old, got fined $200 because his mailbox post was weathered gray instead of colonial white. His mailbox had looked like that for 15 years, but suddenly it threatened the very fabric of our community. I stayed out of it. You learn in the military that some battles aren't worth fighting. Some officers are difficult, and the smartest move is keeping your head down. I figured Karen would burn out eventually. I was wrong. Last Tuesday, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. The envelope looked expensive, intimidating before I even opened it. Inside was an official notice from the Palm Creek Estates HOA with their fancy new letterhead. Fine for violation, $500. I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. My lawn is trimmed. My house is the approved beige. My trash cans live in the garage. Then I read the description. Violation of flag display standards, Section 12, Paragraph 4C. I have an American flag on my front porch. Below it, the Marine Corps flag. The same flag they presented at my retirement ceremony 12 years ago, folded by 2 young Marines in dress blues while a bugler played taps. That flag represents every brother and sister I serve with, every mission completed, every promise kept. Apparently, Karen pushed through a new rule. Any secondary flag had to hang at least 6 inches below the primary flag. Mine hung 3 inches below. Someone came to my house with a measuring tape and documented that my Marine Corps flag was 3 inches too high. There's a quote from my service days. Pick your battles, but never back down from a fight that matters. I'd watched Karen terrorize the neighborhood for 6 months over paint chips and parking spots. I stayed quiet because it didn't affect me. But this was different. This was personal. The next HOA meeting was Thursday evening. About 20 people showed up, a record. Word had spread that Karen was on a rampage. She sat at the front table with her iPad and perfect hair, looking like she was chairing a Fortune 500 board meeting instead of suburban HOA. She had a gavel, an actual gavel. When the floor opened for general concerns, I raised my hand. I walked to the front calmly, kept my voice quiet. The quieter you speak, the more people have to listen. I pulled out the violation notice and explained the situation, the flag, what it represented, standard practices for displaying military flags. I said, "Ma'am, this is a Marine Corps flag. This represents years of service. I understand we need rules, but surely we can make a reasonable exception for a flag that represents dedication and sacrifice." She cut me off, just held up her hand with those perfect nails, and stopped me mid-sentence. Her smile was sweet as poison. Then she said it, the words that changed everything. She looked me in the eye and spoke slowly, making sure everyone heard. Rules are rules, Mr. Paul. Perhaps in the Marine Corps you were accustomed to disorder and careless attitudes toward standards, but here in Palm Creek, we maintain a certain level of class. The room went dead silent. You can call me old. You can call me grumpy. But nobody calls the United States Marine Corps careless. Nobody disrespects the men and women I serve with. The ones who gave everything while people like Karen sat in air-conditioned offices worrying about their lattes. Every Marine knows that moment, when your blood is boiling, but your training says maintain composure. Don't let anger make decisions your brain should make. I took a breath, looked at her smug smile, her tablet, her gavel, her rules. I said quietly, I will not be paying this fine. She didn't blink, just kept smiling. Suit yourself, Mr. Paul. I walked out. Several people left with me. Jerry Thompson patted my shoulder in the parking lot, said I'd said what everyone was thinking, but I barely heard him. I went home, took down both flags, folded them properly, and put them in my closet. It killed me, but I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of daily fines. I figured that was it. I'd made my point. She'd made hers. We'd move on. Life teaches you nothing is ever that simple. Exactly 30 days later, I got another certified letter. Thicker this time. More official. The return address was some law firm in Tampa, with one of those names that's just four surnames strung together, trying to intimidate you before you even see what's inside. I opened it at my kitchen table with my afternoon coffee. The fine had grown. That $500 had mutated into $5,000. The letter explained in detail how daily penalties accumulated at $50 per day, plus administrative fees, plus legal review costs, plus processing charges. But that wasn't the part that made my blood run cold. At the bottom of the letter, in bold text, was a notice. If payment wasn't received within 10 business days, the Palm Creek Estates Homeowners Association would begin proceedings to place a lien on my property for outstanding debts owed to the association. A lien on my house. The house I bought with my retirement savings. They were going to take my home. Over 3 inches. In the Marine Corps, there's a saying, improvise, adapt, overcome. They forgot to add the fourth part. And always read the manual. Karen wanted play by the rules. Fine, we'd play by the rules. Only I was going to play by all the rules. I sat at my kitchen table staring at that letter. 10 business days. That's what I had. 10 days to figure out how to fight someone who controlled every lever of power in this neighborhood. But here's the thing about being a Marine. You don't panic. You assess. You plan. You execute. The first few days, I'll admit, I didn't have a plan. I just watched. And what I watched made my blood boil. Karen's reign of terror hit its peak. She forced the Nguyen family to repaint their front door because it was an unauthorized shade of red. Not red enough, apparently. Or too red. Who knows? Mrs. Nguyen cried when she told me about it. They just painted that door 6 months ago for their daughter's birthday. The girl loved red. Now it had to be colonial red, not cherry red, and the Nguyen's had to pay for it. She measured the grass height at the Johnson's place with an actual ruler. Found it was 2 1/4 inches instead of the maximum allowed 2 inches. Sent them a violation notice. For a 1/4 inch of grass. Bob Johnson is a dentist. Works 60-hour weeks. Pays a lawn service to handle his yard. They come every week. Didn't matter. 2 1/4 inches was a violation. And at her own place? Oh, at her own place. She started what I started calling the Great Construction Project. Apparently her backyard wasn't classy enough. She decided to build something that looked like a Miami nightclub. Giant pool with waterfalls. Built-in bar. Patio that could host a platoon with room to spare. Construction trucks blocked our streets for weeks. The noise started at 7 a.m. every morning. Jackhammers. Cement mixers. Workers shouting. People complained. Of course they complained. The noise was unbearable. The trucks made it impossible to get in and out during morning rush hour. Jerry Thompson nearly missed a doctor's appointment because a cement truck blocked his driveway. When anyone brought up, Karen would smile that poisonous smile and say the construction was fully authorized by the board. The board being her best friend Linda, and a terrified accountant named Doug, who nodded at everything Karen said. I watched this double standard, and something clicked. She kept talking about her new digital version of the HOA bylaws that she'd uploaded to the community website. Everything was on there, she said. Modern, efficient, easy to access. But I've lived here 15 years. I remember when the cloud was just something that ruined your day at the beach. I remember when this HOA was founded, back when computers were the size of refrigerators and people kept paper records. The next morning, I put on my only pair of non-shorts pants and drove to the county clerk's office. I wanted the original founding documents from 1988, the ones that couldn't be edited with a mouse click. An hour of paperwork later, I had it, a dusty bound volume that probably hadn't been opened in a decade. I took it home, poured a large glass of sweet tea, got out a yellow highlighter. This was like studying maps of enemy territory before an operation. Boring as hell, but potentially life-saving. Page by page. Article 1, name. Article 2, definitions. Dear God, it was duller than watching paint dry. Legal speak that took 20 words to say what could be said in 3. My eyes crossed around page 15. But I kept going, because that's what you do. You don't quit halfway through a mission because you're tired or bored. Meanwhile, the construction at Karen's place got louder. Every morning at 7 a.m. like clockwork. I'd be drinking my coffee, and the jackhammers would start. I used it as motivation. Every crash and bang reminded me why I was reading this mind-numbing document. It was 2 a.m. on the 4th night. My back hurt from hunching over the table. My tea had gone warm hours ago. I was on Section 9, Structural Modifications and Landscape Alterations. My brain was fried. I almost called it quits. Then I saw it. Section 9, Article 4. Any structural modifications or landscape alterations exceeding 100 square feet, including pools, patios, or permanent structures, require written approval received by mail from 75% of all HOA members. My heart started pounding. I definitely hadn't approved Karen's Miami nightclub construction. I opened my laptop, pulled up Karen's new digital bylaws on the community website, found Section 9, Article 4. The text had been changed. It now read, any structural modifications or landscape alterations exceeding 100 square feet require approval from the HOA board. The board, her and her 2 puppets. She thought she was clever. She'd illegally altered the document, assuming no one would ever check the dusty originals from 1988. But I kept reading, because you never stop halfway through recon. I flipped ahead to Section 12, Amendments and Modifications. Article 3 was crystal clear. Any amendments to these bylaws, particularly to Section 9 regarding structural standards, require approval by 90% of all households at a special meeting called for that specific purpose. There had been no meeting. Number 90% vote. She hadn't just bent a rule. She committed fraud. She illegally changed the governing document to permit herself to break it, all while finding Jerry for his mailbox and measuring the Johnsons' grass with a ruler. I sat back in my chair. The clock said 2:47 a.m. Karen had just handed me a loaded rifle. A Marine never goes into battle without support. My first call was to a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but an old Army buddy who now specializes in, you guessed it, HOA disputes. He actually loves these cases. Says they're more satisfying than anything else he does because the bad guys are always so convinced they're untouchable. I sent him photos of every highlighted page from that 1988 document. He called me back 20 minutes later. I could hear him laughing. Loudly. Paul, this isn't just a rifle. This is artillery. When can we meet? We met at a Denny's the next morning. David spread out the documents between our coffee cups and explained exactly how screwed Karen was. She committed fraud by altering governing documents. She'd violated her fiduciary duty as HOA president, and the original bylaws had teeth. Real teeth. The kind that could force her to tear down that Miami nightclub in her backyard or pay everyone she'd been terrorizing for the past 6 months. Second step, I call an emergency HOA meeting. According to bylaws, I had that right if I could get signatures from 10% of residents. I collected them in under an hour. People hated Karen so much they would have signed a petition to launch her into the sun. Jerry Thompson signed so enthusiastically he almost broke my pen. The evening of the meeting arrived. The community center. That bland beige room that smelled like carpet cleaner, and decades of boring discussions about pool maintenance. But tonight was different. Tonight, everyone showed up. All 147 households sent at least one person. Some sent two. The room was packed. Standing room only in the back. Karen sat at the head table in her white tennis outfit, looking like an empress about to hold court. She had that smug little smile. That look that said she thought she'd already won. She probably figured I was coming to beg for mercy, or maybe present her with a check for $5,000 and apologize for wasting everyone's time. She opened the meeting with her gavel. That stupid gavel. First order of business. She announced, "Mr. Paul, I see you're on the agenda. I hope you finally decided to settle your debt, and we can all move past this unfortunate situation." I stood up, slowly. My knees aren't what they used to be, and standing up too fast in front of a crowd of people is a good way to look like you're about to fall over. I walked to the front of the room. David, my lawyer friend, stayed seated in the corner. We'd planned this. He was a secret weapon, the ace up my sleeve. I reached into my bag and pulled out that dusty bound volume from 1988, set it down on the table in front of Karen. The sound echoed through the silent room. Thud. Everyone leaned forward. "Sorry," I said. "I'm a bit old-fashioned. I prefer originals to your digital updates." Karen's smile faltered. Just for a second. "That's not relevant," she said quickly. "The new bylaws supersede any outdated versions. We've modernized our governance structure to reflect current best practices in community management." That's when David stood up. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "My name is David Chun. I'm an attorney specializing in HOA law, and I'm here to inform this board that the 1988 document Mr. Paul just presented is the only legally binding governing document for this association. Any changes to it require a very specific process, a process that, I can demonstrate, was never followed." Karen went pale. I mean visible. Everyone in the room noticed it pale. Her hand with the gavel started shaking slightly. I took over. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm and reasonable, "I just wanted to clarify something. Your new pool and patio area, that's larger than 100 square feet, correct?" She tried to recover. "That was approved by the board," she snapped. "All proper procedures were followed. We have documentation." "Interesting," I said, flipping open the 1988 bylaws to the marked page. "Because Section 9, Article 4 of the original and legally binding bylaws states that any structural modification exceeding 100 square feet requires written approval received by mail from 75% of all HOA members." I must have missed that mail. Did anyone here receive a letter asking them to approve Karen's construction project? Silence. People started looking at each other, head shaking. No one had received anything. And furthermore, I continued, Section 12 states that to change that rule, you would need approval from 90% of all households at a special meeting called for that specific purpose. I must have missed that meeting too. Can anyone here remember voting to change our structural modification rules? More silence. More head shaking. Someone in the back whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "I didn't know we could change the rules." David stood up again. "Mrs. Westbrook, you knowingly and fraudulently altered the governing bylaws of this association. That's a serious breach of your fiduciary duty as president. You then used those fraudulent alterations to approve your own construction project, a project we estimate cost approximately $150,000, all while fining your neighbors for having grass that's a quarter-inch too tall or doors painted the wrong shade of red." Karen started to stand up. Her face was red, now instead of pale. You have no right, she shouted. My husband will sue every single one of you. This is harassment. This is a coordinated attack, because you're all jealous of our success. David smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Actually, Mrs. Westbrook will be the ones pursuing legal action. But the 1988 bylaws, he patted the book for emphasis, give us two options that might resolve this without litigation. First option, you immediately demolish the pool and patio and return your yard to its original state, entirely at your own expense, of course. The room erupted, people gasping. Someone applauded. Karen looked like she'd been slapped. That's insane, she hissed. That pool cost a fortune. I'm not tearing it down. David continued as if she hadn't spoken. The second option is financial compensation. Since you violated community development plan and arguably decreased property values with your unauthorized construction, you pay damages to each affected homeowner. We calculate that at $5,000 per household. There are 30 households with direct views of your property who are particularly affected. That's $150,000. Cash within 30 days. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. But I wasn't finished. I had one more move, one more kill shot. I stood up and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. I moved for the immediate removal of Karen Westbrook as HOA president due to fraud and gross violation of our governing bylaws. I second that motion. Mr. Nguyen called out immediately. He was the owner of the wrong shade of red door. His voice was shaking with emotion. The vote was quick. Show of hands. 29 in favor. 1 opposed. Karen voted against her own removal. Her friend Linda and the accountant Doug both raised their hands in favor. Even her own board had turned on her. Motion carries, I said. And then, because someone had to do it, I sat down in Karen's chair at the head of the table. As your new temporary president, my first order of business is a motion to rescind all fines issued in the past 6 months, including Mr. Paul's $5,000 fine for flag placement. The applause was deafening. People were standing, cheering. Jerry Thompson had tears in his eyes. Mrs. Nguyen was hugging her husband. The Johnsons were high-fiving like their kid had just won a soccer championship. Karen grabbed her iPad and her gavel and stormed out. Didn't say a word. Just left. Her friend Linda followed her after a moment of hesitation. The accountant Doug stayed. He actually looked relieved. That was 3 weeks ago. And here's where the story gets really good. See, life has this funny way of working out. People who love building walls often end up running into them. After that meeting, word spread around the neighborhood. Turns out the empire of Karen and husband the developer was a house of cards. Rick's construction business was on the verge of bankruptcy. Multiple projects had gone sideways. That $150,000 pool was their last hurrah, built with money they didn't actually have. Tried to maintain an image they couldn't afford. They didn't have $50,000 to demolish the pool. They definitely didn't have $150,000 to pay us off. And they couldn't just ignore the situation because David, acting as HOA counsel now, filed a lien on their property. A real one. The legal kind that means you can't sell or refinance until you settle your debts. Karen tried to fight it. Of course she did. Her husband hired a lawyer. That lawyer took one look at the 1988 bylaws, at the evidence of fraudulent alterations, at the complete lack of proper approvals, and told them they had no case, advised them to settle. To avoid bankruptcy and potential criminal fraud charges, they had only one option. Last Tuesday, I was sitting on my porch drinking sweet tea when the sign went up. Distress sale. They had to sell their house, their dream house, at a reduced price just to cover the debt and escape. Each of us received a check for $5,000. I donated mine to the Wounded Warrior Project. Seemed appropriate. Jerry Thompson used his to finally get that hip replacement he'd been putting off. The Nguyen's took their family to Disney World. Said their daughter had been asking to go for 3 years. Last week, I watched them move out. No white tennis outfit. No iPad. Just 2 very angry people loading boxes into a U-Haul truck. Someone said they moved to a rental apartment upstate. I didn't ask for details. Didn't need to. The important thing was they were gone. At our first normal HOA meeting last week, I proposed one new rule. Very simple, very short. Flags representing United States military branches, as well as flags supporting police and firefighters, are welcomed in this community. They may be displayed at any height, provided it's done respectfully. Period. The vote was unanimous. Even Doug, the accountant, who'd been so scared under Karen's regime that he barely spoke, raised his hand enthusiastically. You know what the funny thing is? My flag is back up. The American flag and the Marine Corps flag, hanging exactly 3 inches apart, same as before. Nobody's measured them. Nobody's complained. Nobody sent me a certified letter. It's almost like the whole thing was always ridiculous and never needed to happen in the first place. In the Corps, they taught us, never start a fight, but always have a plan to finish it. Karen thought the bylaws were a club to beat people with. She forgot that weapon has 2 ends. She forgot that rules work both ways. She forgot that when you weaponize bureaucracy against people who spend decades dealing with military bureaucracy, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Always read the fine print. Always check the original documents. And never, ever tell a veteran with too much free time that he's careless. I'm back to my boring retired life now. My sprinkler system still acts up. The squirrels still steal from the bird feeder. The only difference is now I'm technically the HOA president, which means I get twice as many emails about pool maintenance and garbage collection schedules. But you know what? I don't mind, because at least now those emails make sense. At least now the rules are fair. At least now nobody's measuring grass with a ruler or fining people for loving their country. This morning, I was out front watering my lawn when a moving truck pulled up to Karen's old house. New family moving in. Young couple with 2 kids. The dad was wearing a Navy veteran hat. I walked over, introduced myself, told him about the HOA. Told him we're pretty laid back around here. Told him if he wants to fly a Navy flag, he's more than welcome. He shook my hand and smiled. Said that's exactly the kind of neighborhood he was hoping for. I went back to my porch, sat down with my sweet tea, and watched the NFL pregame show. It was Sunday. The game was starting on time, just like it should. My flag was flying. My house was safe. And Karen was someone else's problem now. Semper Fi.